Hi, so in this video I'm going to be talking about stress, and I'm sure we could all relate to being stressed, especially now in the time of COVID and taking online classes. A lot of these new things might seem stressful for you, and we're going to talk about that. But in this slideshow, I'm going to be talking about stressors, how stress relates to illness, regulation of stress, and happiness. But first I want to ask a free response question, so feel free to think about this, is what do you stress about? So what are you currently stressing about at the moment, today, this week, this semester, or this year? Think about what you're currently stressing about, and then hopefully you could use your examples for the material that we'll cover. So for example, you might be stressed about Canvas, you might be stressed about taking an online course for the first time, and this whole online virtual atmosphere may be stressful. I'm certainly stressed about being new to Canvas and building courses on Canvas, so I'm with you on that. You could also be stressed about maybe taking online tests or tests in general throughout your classes this semester. You can be feeling stressed about the coronavirus. You could be stressed about making money or not having enough financial aid or monetary reasons. You could be stressed about graduating, so you could have a long-term stress of trying to get through all your classes and passing all your classes in order to graduate or transfer to another college. Or you could be stressed about certain relationships you're having, either with your parents, your kids, your friends, or family. Relationships can also be stressful as well. And with these examples, there are stimulus-based stressors and response-based stressors. Stimulus-based stressors is when a stimulus causes the stress reaction. So for example, taking a test, issues with Canvas, or making money. And a response-based stressor is stress in response to environmental conditions. These stressors are examples of things we don't have control over, but we may react with a stressful reaction. For example, the coronavirus is an environmental stressor that has caused a lot of response-based stress, not only in myself and other people, I'm sure, and we have to accept the reality of the situation and manage our reaction to the stress because we can't necessarily control it. And as we continue this lecture, think about your own stressors and apply what you're experiencing and what you're stressing about to these certain stress topics that we're going to discuss. We appraise these different stressors that we have through a process in which we perceive and respond to a stressor. If we look at this flowchart here, we can see that when we first encounter a stressor, we first have a primary appraisal of it. By first appraising a stressor, we determine whether the stressor can harm us or if it's just a challenge that we can overcome. For example, if we knew a test was coming up, or if we think of the long-term process of taking all my classes in order to graduate, we could appraise that as a challenge, where we could see taking a test as a challenge and doing well, and studying for it in order to prepare yourself. Or we could see graduating as a manageable challenge, so we might put the effort in to do well in our classes in order to graduate. But if we see these same examples as a threat, then we may do poorly on a test, because we may see a test as a threat to our stress. Or if we haven't studied, we might not be prepared for the test. And also we might see graduating as a threat in which we have to pass all our classes, which may be difficult, and we may perceive passing our classes as a threat in the way of graduating. And if our first appraisal is a perception of threat rather than a challenge, then that leads to a secondary appraisal of stress. So once we accept the challenge, then we're good. We could easily manage that and manage our stress as a challenge. But if we perceive that primary appraisal or that primary stressor as a threat, then this leads to the secondary appraisal. And in the secondary appraisal, we appraise the options we have to cope with the stressor. So for example, if we are threatened by not passing our classes in order to graduate, and our secondary appraisal realizes that with the coronavirus added on, we might not feel comfortable taking on online class or may not be able to take classes that fulfill that goal of graduating. So we may see as this as a high threat, and that because of this, there's managing our stress is ineffective, and that we have no other options. Or we could use our secondary appraisal to see effective options, such as getting financial aid to help us take our classes so we don't have to worry about monetary support, and also having a good support system with your family and friends in order to provide effective options in order to lower that threat that you have with either taking a test or graduating. One of the early stress researchers was Walter Cannon, who was the first to identify the body's physiological reactions to stress. And he developed the term the fight or flight response, in which our body is prepared to activate the sympathetic nervous system in response to a perceived threat. And in doing so, our heart starts beating, our blood is circulated throughout our body, our lungs feel heavy and ready to get more air. We start to sweat, our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, and our pupils dilate. And this fight or flight response allows us to quickly react to a stressor by taking on the stressor head on or fleeing from the stressor. So as the name suggests, we could either fight the stressor or we could flight and flee from the stressor. The fight or flight response is a built-in mechanism to help our bodies maintain equilibrium and homeostasis, as it enables us to adjust to the different changes that we experience in our environment. And another important researcher was Hans Selye, in which he discovered the general adaptation syndrome, and this consists of 3 parts. The first part is the alarm reaction, which is the body's immediate reaction when facing a stressor, and this is comparable to the fight or flight response because we're alarmed and we either fight off the stressor or flee from the stressor. And during this stage, your body prepares you for the necessary energy to react to a stressor. And then in the second stage, in the stage of resistance, the initial shock of the alarm wears off and the body starts to react to the stressor. So the body adapts to the stressor. And in this stage of resistance, the body is on high alert and prepared to respond. And then lastly, the stage of exhaustion is when a person is no longer able to adapt to the stressor and the body has depleted its resources in order to adapt to that stressor. And it's during this time at the body that the body can be susceptible to different illnesses. Because the body has depleted its resources, the body becomes weak and it's less likely to fight off different diseases, infections, and illnesses. And so far it may seem that we have talked about stress as a bad thing, but stress could also be good for us too. We need a little bit of stress to get us prepared to accomplish just daily tasks or challenges. And Selye called this kind of stress eustress, which is the kind of stress that makes us feel good, that we are able to manage and fulfill a task. We have an optimal level of stress where just enough stress is good enough for us to navigate our world and accomplish challenges, but too much can lead to distress. as you see with the chart here, as our performance level goes up, so as we increase the number of challenges that we face and our stress level goes up, the more eustress we have, and it reaches a peak. And then once it reaches that peak, if it exceeds higher or our stress level gets higher, then that leads to distress, in which our body is depleted of these resources and in which we're more susceptible to illness. But this is the optimal level of eustress, in which you're able to have a low amount of stress in order to get through daily challenges and daily tasks